Welcome to the Mycelium Signal podcast. As always, I'm your host, Konstantin Tuoniovi. This is another installment of our ongoing series, the Mycelium Forum, where we engage in open-ended conversations with occultist authors and artists. Today, I'm joined by Reverend Matron Thorn, an artist, musician, author, ordained minister and filmmaker originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, now residing in Finland. His numerous bands and projects include Aevangelist, Materie Abyssu, Benighted in Sodom, and he is also a member of the Czech black metal band Inferno and author of the mystical word-faring cyberpunk trilogy, the Sainthood. Please note, this episode was recorded in a pub setting, so you may hear some background ambience, though we reduced it in post-production. Nice to meet you, Matron Thorn, in Tampere, where I'm conducting a road trip because I have had this idea of doing a special episode about occult black metal scene in Finland for my sub-series of the Mycelium Signal called the Mycelium Forum, where we have these open-ended discussions with artists, occultists, and like-minded people, and more like, how would you say, more open talks than the main program, which is most often has like a script, and it has much more like heavy production values in the sense, and I find it very therapeutic even to have a kind of laid back and this kind of unscripted and open-ended discussions with fellow-minded people. But maybe I should tell to my audience how we met. Or this is exactly where we are meeting in person for the first time. Yeah.
Can I say, by the way, the context that you just gave of us conducting this interview is part of what for you is almost like a road trip of subsequent interviews. It's got a very sort of Jack Kerouac kind of on the road sort of guerrilla style to it. And that really kind of speaks to a lot of my own personal interests. I mean, the laid back, this sort of crude, the unrehearsed, that's the authenticity that I think would make something like that really effective compared to always having the kind of more formal context where you're together in a spot and it's pre-planned and talking points are established beforehand. But doing away with all of that, we're here, we're now, and we don't actually know where we'll go with this. Yeah. And that's terrifying in a good way.
So. Yeah, that's a worthy of keepis.
Keepis.
It's I think this is a more interesting interview, not an interview, but more like a discussion in the sense that we are both like insiders with many years under our belt collectively in the scene and also in the occult and the esoteric, of course. And that is a huge part of the Mycelium Signal podcast, of course. That is the
as I've heard from the past interviews that you've done, Johannes, that was Nefastos. Yeah. I was already familiar with him through his collaborations with some mutual friends, I guess. Yeah. I'm speaking, for example, with True Black Dawn. He's a very good lyricist. Obviously he's an accomplished writer and everything. But I wanted to kind of make light of him just for a moment here as well, because that was a very compelling discussion.
Yeah, it was a very in-depth discussion with Johannes, and I also had Nas Alkamed from Oculus twice, and I believe he will be returning to a panel discussion in next year hopefully, because this is December 2025, and but I would disclose that basically this is quite intriguing in the sense that my recently late deceased American friend around a year or year and a half ago said that do you know this artist Matron Thorn from Finland, and I believe he had been listening to your music, and he said to me that you should get this guy on your podcast, and I only had a very cursory idea who you were at the time, and for some reason we started discussing around a couple of months ago online.
Yeah.
And then it finally came to my mind that there are like, how would you say, if you squat like more flies in once, in the sense that I had this idea that I should come to Tampere, of all places. Of course, I have been here like many years ago. I know the place somewhat, but then it came to me that I know a lot of people in Tampere, which was interesting. And then I understood that maybe if I go here as some kind of like a kata basis or this kind of like a road trip, you are the first of 3 people I'm going to interview here, and everybody is heavily related to black metal and the occult. So this is like a first of this kind of series for me, where I kind of travel to somewhere to do this kind of interview. And the late Perttu Häkkinen, the Finnish reporter and writer and artist, also did this kind of like a pilgrimages to Lapland, for example. He had the Lapland trilogy and this kind of stuff. And I believe this is like a good thing to do, in the sense that I'm not always at the studio table, so to speak. And everything is not so constructed, and we don't have heavy microphones here, and we are using like a kind of light, very stealthy type of microphone system. It is better because we don't have to concentrate on the goddamn microphones and the levels, you know.
It'll also be interesting, I think, for your audience to draw their own conclusions about what commonalities us 3 that you intend to interview share, me not knowing who the other 2 are. And I'm supposing they don't know who I am or the other person that you plan to interview. So there will be some interesting conclusions to draw from the nature of all of these completely different but sort of related discussions. I'd be curious to hear, at least.
Yeah. You'll be learn later who they are. So basically, probably at least they're like mutual acquaintances and friends. I believe the Finnish scene is so small, or at least the occult black metal scene is so small that everybody kind of at least knows everybody in some level, I would believe.
I've been to some shows here, and I've encountered people who knew of me from years back. Before I had left Florida, they knew of me, and I was really moved by them approaching me and just telling me, like, this is crazy that you're here. Which it is. This is, on American terms, basically the middle of nowhere in the entire world. I traversed a hemisphere, basically, to get here, and it's as far culturally and probably on some level ideologically from anything that I'm used to. And yet, I actually feel like less of a foreigner here than I did in America.
That's interesting.
America has a way of otherizing everybody, even if you're from there. There's something about you that puts you at odds, that puts you sort of in this situation where you're competing for exceptionality at all times. If you're not exceptional at what you do in America, then you don't earn any recognition. You don't earn any anything, and that which you do earn in America is not guaranteed to you. You don't necessarily, you're not entitled to it unless you are exceedingly wealthy. There are people whose careers, whose ventures, whose life goals have taken them through student loans, debt, probably crime, probably all manner of risk involved in becoming noticed for their exceptionality, and still at the soonest moment where they think that they are safe, where they think that they've made it, that their legacy and their future is secure, a word undoes the entire life experience they've had and destroys them. That is the Old West. That's the Wild West. That's the cowboy life. That's it used to be stray bullets from revolvers. Now it's, I don't know, words on the internet or Google search or whatever it is that draws people to the controversy, and the controversy undoes people, and they shuffle off into the abyss of the cracks between human experience forever.
I have noticed that the kind of constant, how would you say, like day consciousness, if you think about there will be like a day consciousness, which is the everyday life, the fluorescent lights and the, how would you say, internet and this kind of thing. People are the charade, the masquerade, and of everyday life and publicity and this kind of thing. And then there is kind of night consciousness, which I believe is a term coined by late philosopher from Germany called Ludwig Klages. And he's a very difficult philosopher to understand, and I don't claim to understand him, but I understand his concept of the night consciousness, which is kind of like a spiritual consciousness, the night side consciousness. And it's I believe people are going a little bit crazy because they are constantly awake on the information highway, so to speak, and everything is, they kind of don't understand that the internet is not real life. It's some kind of like shared consciousness, and it's kind of a place where the shadow is manifest, because people are, behind anonymity. They feel that they can do such things they wouldn't have the balls to do in real life.
Well, and that's operative. The operative thing that you're defining here is the basically the difference between the simulacra and reality. Society is gradually assimilating to the acceptance of the simulacra as the ideal and the rejection of real experiences. In probably less than a century from now, many of us will be nostalgic for things that, by their definition, didn't actually take place. They were moments spent on the internet. They were moments of information that were passed from source to source, but that never had any tangibility. They were never real. But living inside that night consciousness it's not sustainable in the way that I think people they seek it. There are some of us that I think can sustain that in our own way, and I think to its extremity, it requires usually something unlawful, something that is deplorable by society. And once you have made it to that, there is no turning back. You are the night consciousness has sort of become your subjective reality at that point. To other people, it is purely a person constantly withholding of themselves. They don't have truly meaningful relationships anymore because other people must maintain some balance between both levels of consciousness. So without that, you get this sort of, back to the masquerade, as you said, you get that and the safety that comes with it and the seclusion that comes with it. When you live out in the open as who you really are, that is the thing that actually takes balls. That is the thing that actually requires probably derision and ostracization. It requires being a pariah. And this is something that speaks, I think, to kind of that danger that black metal used to have, that I think everyone sort of, they wax poetic about it and they talk about it to each other. And there are people who try to emulate it through the surface level features of it, the characteristics that they recognized on the surface of the individuals that actually did live like this. Even to a certain extent, they might dabble in certain kind of like shady things, doing this and that, but it has no meaning to them. It's empty because all of it comes from the simulacra. It's all just a reach to become. And if you don't actually have a hold on who you are, anything will devour you, and you just essentially become part of a machine.
Yeah, it's kind of like the machine, like from Philip K. Dick had this, the science fiction late writer had this idea of black iron prison, which is basically, it's a very wild theory, but basically it was something like the Roman Empire didn't end in his theory. It's still like a continued to this date, and it's now some kind of totalitarian, humongous, like a power regime or something, which almost always like kind of suffocates any kind of resistance. It's basically like the Matrix in the movies.
Well, that's a good. That's actually probably a fitting segue to mentioning. Also Orwell. And Orwell, obviously, that's a much more outright example of the sort of subversive orchestration of things that are meant to accelerate the decline of human civilization, but not by, I might quote, Elijah Wood in the Robert Rodriguez film from 1999, The Faculty, and he's describing aliens coming and taking over the world and everything. But what Elijah Wood said in the movie was like, you know, if you were going to invade the world, would you blow up the White House Independence Day style, or would you sneak in through the back door? And I've held on to that quote for the movie came out in '99. Since I've seen it, I've always thought about that as a fitting metaphor for as I said, the subversion of a lot of these ideas and things that we're facing that some people are not even really aware that not only are they confronting every day of their lives, but they have actively been participating in it unknowingly.
Yes.
And even as tools in the hands of the devil.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you get there and by the time you realize it, it's too late.
Yeah, it's kind of like insidious in the sense that if you think about like some kind of true liberation or some kind of like a pirate-like lawlessness, and I'm not speaking directly about criminality here, but some kind of like spiritual armed lawlessness. What's the word, like to be outlaw? Yeah, I think Votain had this track or album called Lawless Darkness or something like this.
Yeah.
And this is a topic which has been fascinating me for a lot of time now, because I have this project called The Pit at my cottage plot. So basically, to put it long story short, I have been doing like this kind of like excavation or digging project for 10 years now. So I have basically converted the lower block of the cottage for some kind of, how would you say, like a Bronze Age style, like a network of sanctuaries and this kind of like ritual places. And it's so out of the ordinary, and it looks like absolutely fucking crazy at night. If you wander there by flashlight or something, it looks like something that maybe some neighbors have had the thought that maybe they should call the authorities or something, because it looks so outlandish. But that is the fucking point, in the sense that it's like it looks absolutely crazy. It looks insane, and I believe that's the source of the energy of the place, because it has this like a foreboding element, and there's the element that it is without logic. Who would in their right mind to use 10 years to excavate like a long like, how would you say, like necromantian style, like underground sanctuaries and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So basically,
in the past like minute or two here, we've touched on three things that are, at least in my perspective, inherently related, and that's insanity, criminality, and spirituality.
Yeah.
And their relative definitions are all something that are definitive to what makes a human being genuine. And this is my own personal perspective on this. And it's also interesting that you've touched on the word outlaw and what that means in the greater context of, again, calling back to what we were just talking about, the sort of time and place that we're in right now as a civilization. In the manuscript that I'm working on, there is a concept that I touch on, and this is something from the very near the end of the entire manuscript, and it's an event that's called the Prestige of the Last Outlaw. And this is a time when, after civilization has reached its undeniable decline, that means that to everyone around us, it is undeniable that we are in the end times, the death knell of whatever this age is, but in a sense that it's a war that every living being has to fight. And not just that, but what makes it the prestige of the last outlaw is that they will be confronted by absolutely everything that opposes their true nature, their true beliefs. If you are not a true believer, then you will become a pawn. You will become a true slave.
Yeah.
And it is only the true believers who will join the prestige of the last outlaw. And this is not necessarily, I'm saying, a concept that is exclusive to my own invention. It's been described in a lot of different ways by a lot of philosophers and mysticists and occultists and things like that. But once the end times have started, our ability to make decisions, our ability to believe, all of this will be taken from us. it probably sounds like an insane apocalyptic viewpoint, but it's exactly this sort of thing that I think the establishment wants to make sure we think it's insane, because that keeps us in control. Everyone who's aware of what's really going on will become targeted, will become hunted down. Those who aspire, who still aspire, the aspirants they will all be placed on a list, basically. A list to be rounded up, and well, it kind of sounds like something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, what they say is that those who don't remember history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, we've sort of forgotten the lessons of things. And look, everyone can be conspiratorial. Everybody can find their own understanding of certain events and things throughout history, why they happened, why they took place. That's perfectly fine, and even it's valid. Everyone's entitled to their own, the validity of their own opinions. But once you get to just objective truths, to just things that factually either were not, and you understand that the information that you have has been given to you from a source, and you look at the sources and you look at the things you know, and you start asking questions like, I understand I was given this information, but why was it presented to me like this? Why was it presented to me in this context? Who stands to gain something from my participation in the support of a belief, of an understanding? And the more you ask that, the darker it gets. The darker the night becomes, the farther you walk into the dark of the night is the color of death. And that is where you go when you ask too many questions, but you also achieve that illumination in the darkest point of that night.
Yeah. That's directly like catabasis. So there's the monstrum.
I was hoping you'd say it.
Yeah, the monstrum or the monster at the end. And then I believe there is some kind of not some kind of like white knight against some kind of monster type of duel or fight, but something which is kind of the integration of your shadow, I would believe, and something which is very dangerous and it's very capricious to do this kind of thing. And when you emerge from there, what emerges is the monstrum and yourself, but you are kind of fulfilling your individuation when you embark to the anabasis from out of the depths into the light again. And this, I believe, is something which the society is sorely lacking in the Western world, and maybe also in the East, because it doesn't look that good in the East too nowadays anymore.
I think that people have sort of taken a look at what's been going on over in my home country, and a lot of the feedback that I've gotten about it is just that it is right now at least one of the top three in terms of examples of our decline. It is impossible to look at America and the state of things, the things that have not just been allowed to happen, but the things that are encouraged, the sort of lifestyles and the sort of values. And there's an understanding that maybe this is like the sort of the consequences of a nation that lacks a true understanding of its own nationality or its nationalism. There's definitely still patriotic people out there and people who still believe in these, the core American values as they want to define them. And you can interpret that however you want. It's very subjective, depending on which part of the United States you've been in. I've been to just about every single state in the United States, and I've had a unique experience everywhere. And it's been a fascination of mine in understanding what exactly made those different regions of the country different. Now, I'm from Florida, and I think that it has probably not the most shining reputation. If we're considering rumors and stories about what goes on in Florida, it's not that far from the truth, really.
Yeah.
There is kind of like a sense that if we might even go back to what we said about the night consciousness, that Florida is a place where that is not just a real side to the entire place itself, but that it could even be argued that much of it is that at all times. You can look for benevolence there, and you will find it, but the the experiences that I've had have largely sort of been a question of lessers of two evils or comparative wickedness and things like that. And I'm not trying to make any blanket generalizations about people or things there. It's just that there is a vibe, an atmosphere to being in Florida, to living there. And this includes the distinct differentiation between northern Florida, central Florida, and southern Florida. I'm from the southern part of Florida, which I guess ethnically is the most diverse region of Florida, because you have people who've come from all over the world seeking the tropical side, the vacation, the retirement side. You've got people who just barely made it over there, escaping from local adjacent countries on rafts, and many of their family members were either sent back or died along the way, that kind of stuff. I encountered a similar thing here in Finland when I was in nursing school here, and I had classmates who had arrived from parts of Africa. One in particular, he had told me a story that he was the lone survivor of a raft that basically deteriorated in the ocean, and everyone else died. And regardless of what anybody's political views or any of that shit, it's a harrowing story. It's a form of experience that is not at all relatable or familiar to most people whose lives have been, shall we say, helped constantly, have been logistically, structurally, ideologically way less unstable than escaping something like that. To have to escape, to seek asylum. Same thing with people I had met from Ukraine, from people from Russia, in fact, people from just about everywhere, every opposing side I have encountered here in Finland. And what makes that special in the context of Finland especially is that I am on the outside of my own home country, seeing what's going on there, looking in. And I am usually asked a lot about the blame that I place, and I generally just don't answer. It's not a black and white answer. It's not a simple thing. Everybody wants them. Is it this? Is it that? Who do we point the finger at? Who do we blame? And I think it's rational as a human being when you're afraid of that darkness to be desperate and need to find someone to be angry at. In any situation, you are late for work, but it's not really because of anything in particular, but just in the circumstances. But you'll find one of those things and decide, this is the main thing. I fucking hate that thing today because it's the reason the bad thing happened. And I need at least that. I need at least that to be able to blame. But where I'm going with this is just that, there is no black and white answer to all of these things. And in the future, when we reach that age, when we reach the prestige of the last outlaw, this very rarefied territory of human existence where there will only be a few of us, and probably most of us won't even be known to each other. It's not going to be some like cult. It's not going to be some like unified membership, like group kind of thing. There would be a lot of actually disparity between all of us and probably our individual beliefs. But the thing that matters is that we don't succumb to the singular blaming of like one thing, one person.
Yeah.
And understanding that a lot of that kind of mindset is what drove us to the position that we're in the first place. The only way that we would survive that age is to not really try to change each other, but to sort of accept that the survival of our species really just depends that we find the one commonality in the darkness, that illuminate together or scatter in the darkness and die.
I believe that this dualism and this kind of this kind of thinking that for somebody to think that he's a good man or woman, we are like a part of the good people, so to speak. But then again, this kind of like idealistic thinking was probably happening during the Khmer rule in Cambodia, when they were conducting the massacre, and everywhere where people were conducting massacres, they probably thought that they were ideologically the good people on the right side of history or whatever. So basically,
does that remind you of something?
Yeah, it really does, and I believe I don't find it personally like fearsome But I find it quite detestable that people don't understand their own shadow, in the sense that it's always somebody else's fault. And of course, people are like tribalistic by design. It's in our genes. And I would believe the only way we could pull out of ourselves from the current Kali Yuga would be like some kind of like a cosmic level, like extinction level type of common enemy for the fucking whole planet. And
I can see that, yes.
The pressure we would need just about that. But then again, I'm such a pessimist nowadays, because it's like even though we would hear that there's like a planet crusher level asteroid or meteoroid like reaching to Earth and fucking ending everything, I would believe that people are so stuck up in their own ass that they wouldn't find the will to like cooperate the nations and whatever.
No, they would try to find, okay, whose fault is this meteor?
It's your fault.
That's all that they want, and then they feel that they can seek some sort of they can vindicate themselves on the suffering of the person who's to blame. Yeah. And again, that's very reductive thinking. I think that's exactly what's going to waste a lot of time and energy. It is going to be your enemies. It is going to be the people whose existence disgusts you the most, their religious customs and whatever it is they pray to, that in the end, it's not going to make any difference. The common enemy does not care. It is going to be a mechanical device that is cold and indifferent to whatever mystical ideas we have, or whatever sense of organic, fleshy 21st century purpose we have. It aspires to replace us. And there are people who are in power who have quite frighteningly been enslaved by these forces. We are talking about powers and principalities that are both material and immaterial. The material ones are at least the ones whose influence, if we're diligent, we can detect it, and we can covertly protect ourselves from it to the greatest extent that we can. And there are ways to do that. A lot of it has to do with the concept of hidden but not hiding. That is, you don't make everything known about yourself. See, this is a very common thread through culturally right now. It emerges that everything is the fulfillment of the false promises of ego, narcissism, all of these things. It's being weaponized against us. So you have people whose mental health is thrown off balance deliberately as a byproduct, a desired byproduct of the machine to generate and engineer and manufacture mass murderers, to manufacture people to go and conduct their sinister experiments. But as long as they come forward with a big, sad, crying, like, so sorry this happened, they also have educated the people, or shall I say, they've manipulated the people to accept that as placation, as this is what's going to make everything okay. They seem to genuinely feel bad about the whole dead school children thing, guys. Like, maybe we should give the poor innocent little billionaires a break. We should, all those politicians, they're not so bad, right?
Yeah.
Soon we're all going to be saying that to each other. And the ones who don't say that, they're going to become the first targets. They're going to figure out what is it that we're doing wrong so that that person has not yet been converted. They want you to either convert out of intrigue, allure, or fear and terror and paranoia. Don't get me wrong. It is my personal belief that a little bit of paranoia will keep you alive.
Yeah.
A little bit of cynicism will keep you alive. As you said, pessimism, but I think a little bit is healthy. It's where you have too much of anything. It's where you create an imbalance. That's what they will exploit to manipulate and use you to fulfill the things that they're after, which is essentially to turn you into, coal to throw into a furnace to power their devices. I'm describing stuff that's very, maybe Matrix-like right now. But see, it's part of the plan to keep ideas like this sounding crazy.
Yes.
Everyone who will speak up, everyone who will do and say and write and publish and sing about certain things is going to be made to look as a bigot, as a lunatic, as a fraud, as a manipulator. they will point the finger at them and say, fear this person, hate this person, persecute this person, kill this person, silence this person. And whoever does it is guaranteed a position in our new kingdom, and that is a lie. There is no position for any of us, for any of the people of the socioeconomic status to listen to the words I'm saying at this moment right now. They're being targeted too. Yeah. All of us are. And they're going to come for us, and it's going to be dark.
It's like eventually, if the, how would you say, if this kind of like a political polarization goes to either direction, then it will be quite totalitarian in the sense. And if you think about black metal in Iran, for example, it's basically hazardous to your health to be in a black metal band in a place like Iran, or even you might get executed. I know a guy from who is residing in Britain. He's from Iran.
You're talking about Cheyenne
from Tribes, yes.
Kept up with a lot of this, and his it's very audacious what he's doing, especially with the response. I know that he regularly gets threats of violence.
Yeah.
On a obviously like an ethnic level, on an ideological level, everything like that, and yet, as far as the scene goes, he's someone who is very much out in the open, doing something that goes to the sincerity of what he's creating. I mean, you've got like a lot of bands that will attempt to convince you of what they're doing by simply telling you, but I definitely recognize and respect what he's doing, putting himself out there, knowing that there are very sincere, let me say, groups of certain people who are against it, who are inherently against it. He very well could, face consequences that go beyond being an artist, being a musician, being in a band somewhere. This is like human to human, an ideological, it is being resisted, what he's doing. And that puts him in a place of, prestige, in my opinion. I respect that. I personally, I find this to be the most appealing aspect of Trivax. And the music is good. And I mean, I don't know if I'm like the best person to ask about it. But what has kept me following him is the undeniable courage. I think it's more than like an aesthetic thing. It's not something he's using to self-promote, to make the band bigger or any stuff like that. And I think that's the thing that should be taken away from anything people see about it, that it should be clear that when there's people who are going against what are high stakes to perpetuate the creation of art and freedoms of certain kinds, that's the thing that shouldn't be ignored. And it should be protected, and it should be verbalized, and the example should be seen. There was a quote I remember as well from Alex from the Portuguese black metal band Corpus Christi, which I read it in an interview he said a long time ago. And I think it was in regards to a lot of new bands that were emerging. This was probably in the early 2000s, but he had said that like there need to be less people starting bands and more people doing things for the Lord. And of course, as a satanic creator of music, he was perhaps on the surface implying something that, on the surface what would be interpreted from that. But my takeaway from it was something much more profound in that, again, it's a lot of show and tell. There are people who tell and there are people who show. And the people who show don't usually need to tell.
Yeah.
And that especially comes down to the people creating music and art that is marketed to you as evil and dark. Every day, there's another band, the most evil thing you've ever heard. All the buzzwords, all the scary shit, the fucking Lovecraftian this, the fucking... I like to think of it as like thesaurus black metal, People promoting it, open a thesaurus and find the best synonyms that haven't been used yet to talk about stuff that honestly is pretty shallow and doesn't really deserve any of it. But then there's things that don't really need to do that. No matter how you feel about Deathspell Omega, it speaks for itself. They make a very specific kind of marketing with Norma Evangelium Diaboli that is respectable in that it's deliberately minimized to just what you need to know. And I respect that as a person, aesthetically, artistically, the approach to that kind of marketing is very important. I think mismarketing, mispromotion of a product or something as important as art is kind of a felony against the art itself. And we don't really get a lot of control over other people's understanding of something. But that's why you have to concentrate and focus the message that you are trying to deliver. You have to do that at the core, at the art itself. And then it's just not necessary to really take it that much farther. You don't need to introduce Portal from Australia. Yeah. Anybody that has heard it knows I'm talking about Portal. Their sound and everything is concentrated to a point that it is unmistakable. That is, and that brings me to this side of things, and that is the artistic signature. This is the thing that across the board, no matter what you do, no matter what your medium is, you can make black metal, you can make country music, you can make anything, but there's only one aspect to it that is salient, that will last forever, and that's the artistic signature. That's the resistance against artificial intelligence. It's got nothing to do with what it can emulate or how good it can do this or that. People are missing really what's important here. A perfect replication by a machine of genuine art is impossible. And the true appreciators of the art will always recognize authenticity over commodity, over something that's been manufactured to be a product. You know Timo Kettola.
Yes.
Yeah.
The late Timo Kettola is the artist.
It will come to pass, if it hasn't already, but it will come to pass that someone will attempt to AI sample and generate I don't know what to call it, but an iteration of it. But anybody who loves what he did, anybody who recognizes his artistic signature will always be able to call it out for what it is. Will always be able to spot a forgery. That is going to be a divine skill in the future. Because in the future, more and more of our creation, more and more of the things that define us as human beings are going to be taken away from us and either resold to us at a subscription fee, or just raped from us and absolutely banished. And we are given this thing we are forced to accept so that it supports the existence of the machine, the thing that is shadowing over us. And so his art, anyone's art, anyone that does this, it will be sampled, but the ability to spot fakes, to call out forgeries, is a divine gift. It's a skill. Yeah. And we have to cultivate that. That's our resistance against it. Except that these things, calling out, putting an end to bullshit is it is our fucking jihad against the bullshit, man. Yeah. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That's where we're at. And it's going to be apply to other things too. The ability to harvest and farm our own food, agriculture, carpentry, handcrafts, things that looked that they were focused by a fleshy mind, that came from an unquantifiable source. That is the essence of what makes us human beings and what makes the art real art and not AI. Look, I'm not necessarily saying that just because a machine can, kind of sort of make something that looks like what you made, that your art is like meaningless or whatever. What it should tell you though is that the value of the art that you've created, it is not predicated on how many people observe it or notice it or how famous it is, the recognition. That's irrelevant. The authenticity is that it is recognizable as distinctly belonging to you. That is something a machine cannot recreate because the qualities of the art that make it belong to you came from something that the machine doesn't know how to do, which is extrapolate from lived experience, from anxiety, from mistakes, from crude, misplaced rage and anger. There are things, look, it sounds very romantic the way I'm describing it, but that is the truth. And that's where you have to balance your cynicism. Don't be so cynical that you can't think of this as being very, very important. Because at the end of the day, everything around us is bullshit. And the only stuff that we have, that we truly possess, that no one can take away from us, is our ability to do these things. But more and more every day, we are being sold this idea that that is going to become obsolete, that these things will replace it and people will, they will pay for the machine to do it. They don't need you as an artist. That is true, and it's also not true. Again, the real appreciators, the enthusiasts, the ones with the real passion, fellow human beings, will look at what you made and feel something. They will look at what the computer made, and they will not pay for it. But it goes beyond money. It's really not about money at all. You have to return to the thinking that creation for the sake of creation is the most meaningful aspect of it. You have to move away from this mindset that its value, your importance, anything this is all material, and it's all numbers, it's all algorithms and bullshit simulacra. This is not real. Yeah. It's not anything that's real. What's real is the pain that you felt that made you make that song. It's the trauma that you lived through that made you make that painting, that someone else will see and feel like, wow, I no longer feel truly alone because this person made this. And I got to live long enough to see someone, and I didn't have to go my whole life in this private hell. Someone out there noticed me in this weird cosmic transcendent way. There is no transcendence in AI. It is a machine. It is a computer. It is a very shitty computer at the moment. People give it way too much credit. It is basically a glorified Google search with some bells and whistles. It should not be seen as more than that. But anyway, to summarize this whole big spiel of mine here, everything that you can do as a human being is defined by what was felt, by what was lived to make it uniquely yours. And the people who want, just a fucking product, like they want the dayside album with the fucking AI generated cover. Like, look, that's good enough for some people because that's not why they want it. That's not why they care about it. But the people who really love art, the people who really want the expression, will feel cheated when they get that. To preserve the livelihood of the band and the money they're making, doing this, doing that, what's financially, what's economical, fine. Do what you want to do. But anybody who was looking for purpose in that is going to feel cheated, and has. And we've seen that.
Amen to that.
Keep peace.
Keep peace.
But yeah, I very much like the bar setting for the discussion because it feels it feels more authentic to what it is. You stopped on your road trip here, and here I am. Yeah. And I think the nature of that, in if we look at it cinematically, is very interesting.
Yeah.
That, you're one person from the whole of human civilization right now, and you and I cross paths in this moment at this particular crossroads in existence to have this discussion. Yes. And so I think there's that is very relevant to just this sort of transience of a discussion in a bar on a Saturday in Tampere.
It's kind of it has this rawness element in the sense that we haven't met ever before in person, and we have been just talking about around 2 months online or something like that. So basically we are not that well acquainted, but there's this interesting theme which is underlying the whole program, the Mycelium Signal podcast. It's the mycelium itself. It's like I have known loads and loads of people over the last 30 years or so, but during the last 5 years or so, it has been very, very cathartic time of my life, in the sense that I basically made a vow 6 years ago that I would devote the rest of my life to doing what I've been always doing aside from work, that is. And after that kind of work burnout, I understood that this is kind of the rest of my life type of magnum opus mission, in the sense that I'm putting all my how would you say, eggs in one basket in the sense, and I'm going to all in. And it has been a very fruitful, and I have met lots of people over the globe. And one thing which I have been distilling in the sense that my mission has been to find the others, so to speak. I think Timothy Leary had this line, like back in the day, in the 60s perhaps, find the others. So it's an imperative in the sense that I have been finding people who are more and more and more aligned what I'm doing myself. And it's basically this weird, almost like a spiritual tribe all over the globe. And I know people from America and Germany and whatever, like some British people as well. And it's this interesting thing that you're speaking about a person whom you have never met before, and you still have this weird, like, understanding this guy understands this kind of very anomalous, very exotic, occult concepts that most of the fucking world doesn't even have a minimum grasp of. What is this about? What do you think? That what is the, like, some kind of weird, like Mycelium, like, system which is connecting these people who are doing something out of the diamond and not something out of for fame or something?
Good question. And actually, the last point you made there, I think, is extremely critical to the understanding of this, because it's the authentic people. It is not the ones who have sort of this nescience for just the sake of it. The gnosis and everything that has occurred to them is not something that was necessarily as simple as acquiring through picking up a book or Wikipedia or anything like that. I might again reference my manuscript because this is a very crucial point to the understanding of what is the illumination to this particular religious movement, and it occurs in what's called the existential dark place. And it's something that most, if not everyone, does experience. But sort of what happens there, it's either that people remain there and they become controlled, they become taken, consumed, however you want to think of it, by that which oppresses them there. Or they become illuminated to finding their way back out of it, which is a perilous journey. It's a perilous journey, maybe even more so to leave than it is to enter, because the entry does not necessarily depend on anything. It may not even be voluntary. For some people, the entry is through trauma, through experiencing something that was done to you. That can happen over time. That could be a car accident that took away your ability to walk, and maybe you were a footballer. Or it could be overindulgence. It could be excess. It could be that you found nihilistic hedonism as an outlet, as a response to trauma or to boredom, and it got out of hand and you ended up losing yourself, losing relationships, cutting ties with things that supported a normal life for you. And thus you enter the existential dark place. Now, there's a turning point there where it descends and it gets worse and worse, it escalates, and you find yourself at a crossroads where you either give in or you are illuminated to purpose and you find your way out. And the path to go out begins with an acceptance of the reconstruction of who you are. And I believe that among people with these understandings of these sort of broad and sometimes nebulous esoteric themes and concepts, they entered the existential dark place. If it is something that if these themes and things they've actually applied to who they are now, that if it supports their spiritual and personal development. Look, if it's helped them to wake up in the morning and get out of bed and realize that, okay, the old me would have slept until 12 and then woke and then felt defeated and useless and unfulfilled by the day. I am going against that. Going against the things that were self-destructive, the things that destroyed, that ultimately led to the destruction of your previous self, and recognizing that and actively going against it is another divine gift. It is a skill that is sacred, because it is actually exceedingly rare for someone to successfully be able to do that. To leave the existential dark place is it's providence. It's the spark of the divine is what is required to leave. And it is the manifestation of gifts that should be seen as being unnatural. These are things that are not like, it's not small, like you can't diminish it to the realms of just, I bought a self-help book or I went to therapy or whatever, and then, things kind of got better. I'm also not saying to necessarily inflate your head with these like superfluous and outlandish ideas. I'm not talking about picking up a wand. I'm not talking about doing things that don't actually carry any real meaning in reality. But I'm saying to actually identify very real, tangible, verifiable things, actions, and ideas, mindsets, even spirituality it's sacred, that you accept it and abide by it. It is divine to go against your actual nature. As you were saying earlier about the human civilization being inherently tribal, that's true, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. Because see, what leads to evolution is not the desire, but rather that whatever form we have right now, whatever physicality or spirituality or psychology we have, must change to adapt to the circumstances that are working against it. The tribalism of the human race is something that we can sort of work to transcend, to find the power in singularity, to find the power in being alone, in solitude, which comes back to what we talked about before in terms of spirituality. Again, my personal perspective is that the failure of organized religion, for example, is in fact the tribal part, the organized part. It is the groupthink part, the thing that says that everyone has to get together and agree on the same thing, think the same thing, and anyone that doesn't needs help. Now, that's the benevolent interpretation of it, but it rarely, as we've seen from like the Crusades, for example, help does not manifest in quite the pats on the back and hugs and stuff. It's more of like impalement and burning and, witch hunting type shit. But when you restrict religion to be inherently singular and personal and individualistic, you don't tell anybody what you are. You don't tell anybody what you believe. Stop showing off your good works, your this. Stop advertising it. Then you sort of search it for its actual value, which is what it is for yourself. And it's from there that you can cultivate and nurture that to becoming something that is fundamental to who you are. That is the path to that divine gift, that divine ability, is to teach oneself to be spiritually closed off, to be spiritually withdrawn into the inner sanctum, into the nether regions of the self. That means some scary things as well, because you have to confront the darkness that is inside you. You have to reconcile both dimensions of who you are to establish the true spiritual parameters of what your destiny is meant to contain. Otherwise, you will be lost and consumed by one side, and the imbalance will go on forever.
Yeah, I believe most people are, because they are devoid of the demonic influence, they are prone to all kinds of power games and all kinds of like ideologies and idealism in the sense. And you mentioned this thing called dark place of the existential dark place. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, it sounds like a dark night of the soul and this kind of thing, like the alchemical night read, or the kind of decomposition phase where everything is devoid of meaning and it's completely like black out of light.
Yes, yeah. In fact, I'm very happy you use that word. Yeah. Suffering is nigredo in the existential dark place. Yes. And that, once you have reconciled that, once you have submitted to this and finally relinquished the bonds and ties of your former life, the life that could not serve you spiritually, intellectually, psychologically, that is the beginning of what conceptually in the manuscript is called the true lore. The true lore begins there, in the existential dark place, and only there. Any ascent, any success that you know before that is material only. Because with the true suffering that you experience, the trials of the self, I mean, you emerge to the person that you were meant to be, with the strengths and the insight to navigate the rest of the path towards your last monument, towards your destiny.
Yeah, the magnum opus, the great work.
Again,
there are many names.
Many names. In Althoros, it is the last monument.
This is very interesting. I almost got some like a cold shivers when you spoke about this, the dark place, in the sense that I believe that there's this Finnish expression called kölin oli vedetty. I believe it's keel hauled. You know, the old like punishment from the pirate ships where you are thrown out of the ship and there's this kind of line which goes below, or the rope which goes below the ship, and you get almost like drowned, and you hit the ship like the outer surface of the ship, and it's basically most people probably died, or they were like completely like wrecked up when they were pulled out of the other side. So it's basically like getting severely beaten up with drowning. So
it can have many forms, and the existential dark place is subjective, entirely subjective to each person. And I mean, that's like, I suppose, a very psychological way of looking at it, but it can also be quite literal in that you can see a person and understand they are in a depression. You may not know the depths of it, what it actually means, and their life, you may even know the details of their day-to-day life. They wake up, they still go to work, they still do things. But the things that torment them will not necessarily be obvious. They won't necessarily be on the outside. The existential dark place, they could be so deep in it that they've reached a point where they have heard this, what's also canonically inside the manuscript known as the heavenly dark realm beckoning, which is essentially one of the worst kinds of things and one of the last kinds of things that can happen to you there. And it's this calling that you hear, that once you hear it, it's impossible to resist. And it basically, it leads you to what is beyond the existential dark place, not back towards your destiny, but away from it, towards what we call, again, canonically, the abysscape. And you follow that, you answer that call, and it always leads to something horrible. It leads to terrorism. It leads to murder, suicide. It leads to whatever will be sort of the antithesis of the last monument for you, a final extreme of something which in human earthly terms we would conceive as being something horrible. You may not even see it that way. It may illuminate itself to you as being something beautiful, something purposeful, something that is completely like essential to who you are, to do something that is terrible. And depending on what led you there, the understanding that should be ascertained from an onlooker who sees this should be essentially that this person succumbed. This person did not find their way out of the existential dark place. They stayed there, and that became their destiny. The true thing that they left behind, what they were meant to become canonically, is called forsaken destiny. And it is this dark gift that can also be something very beautiful to someone else in the existential dark place. Someone else in the existential dark place that witnesses this and may even know to some extent the forsaken destiny of that lost person. That may be the point where they find their illumination, and their true lore may begin with that. So you see, in this manuscript, in Althoros, everything is not black and white, because that's not how things are. And in fact, this horrible thing that did happen as a result of this person, this forsaken destiny, may actually be the impetus for one other person there to gain the strength to escape, to ascend, to return from the existential dark place, to find the oasis of the self. In the manuscript, the existential dark place is described as being a region, a liminal region between where we are physically on the material plane and the divine regions of the outer realms, the either aetherscape or the abysscape. But in between those things are the places where the trials of the self happen to prepare you for wherever you're meant to go.
Would you like in this, I don't remember the name which you got, but there's this kind of, how would you say, one direction is kind of towards your magnum opus, to your great work, and one is the opposite, the polar opposite of that. Do you think that the polar opposite of that, kind of another direction where you like keep away too long in the dark place, so to speak, do you think it's some kind of like a siren call or some kind of like a poisoned wine which you're drinking because it tastes so good, but you can't stop drinking even though it's poisoning yourself?
Yes, exactly.
It's destroying you.
That's a really good way to sort of ask that, because in fact, that's why it is called the heavenly dark realm beckoning. It's not usually going to be an allure that is objectively sinister, or despite it actually being absolutely that. But usually it will come in the form of something that is pervasive enough to seduce you. It could be another person who is also answering the same call, and they convince you, look, this is it. The best you can do is just to go down this road with me, decline with me. At least we'll be together, right? At least we will suffer and everything will end and we'll be together. Someone will try to convince you of that. Or it is the temptation to return to the very thing that got you there, but to absolutely take it as far as it can go. Or it could be the defiance of an oppressor or an abuser, to seek, instead of, well, forgiveness is broad and in many forms. Forgiveness might be, along the lines of just letting go of what made you angry at them, what drove you to feel like you needed to live your life in a way that would defy what their expectations or assumptions of you were. But actually, your heavenly dark realm beckoning could be to go and seek vengeance against them. Destroying your destiny in the process, and also that of another person. It could be a lot of things. And it is usually very sweet and seductive, because the seduction of revenge, the seduction of retribution, of intoxication, of escapism. Fulfillment of the ego in at whatever cost. When you abandon dignity, when you abandon certain inhibitions, you are capable of anything. And that is one of the main tests within the existential dark place, that you must endure what it takes to challenge your ability to resist, your ability to not abandon the harrows of the self, to hold on to, I don't know if I would use the word hope, but to just not go in that direction. That is the definition to the true lore. Your true lore begins with the triumph over these trials. And then you begin entering an understanding of all of the tenets of Altharos. There's 7. And then you make your way back towards destiny. And I guess if we were to look at this cosmologically as a physical map, it is something we can imagine 3 concentric circles, where in the center is where you start. This is where we are, the material plane, our life as we've lived it before entering the existential place. Then the second circle is a ring around the center, and it is the liminal, and that's the divine liminal. There is the etheric liminal, which is where you experience different kinds of trials after leaving the existential dark place. These are the trials that challenge your commitment to your destiny. It is not a death sentence, or it is not necessarily anything that is necessarily going to destroy you, but it is something that will either see that you fulfill what you found to be your purpose, or you simply stay there if you have changed your values. Nonetheless, the abyssic liminal is where the existential darkness, the desert of the self.
So akin to like a rite of passage or this kind of thing, which I believe that in most traditions there is this kind of challenge, which is something, I believe this kind of insidious challenge it's kind of probably more harrowing in the sense, the harrowing of Christ, for example, in the Bible, that you can have all of this if you succumb to my rule, you know. I believe Satan had said to Christ, for example.
In a desert.
Yeah, in the desert, yes. And I believe the desert is a very good, like, you know, the hinterlands. I believe it's a very good, like, a symbol. And
it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, metaphor in this sense. And
because it's the absence, the desolation of the spirit is represented perfectly by a desert. Because it's not just that there's this profound and vast emptiness, but there's also this profound and vast opportunity.
Yeah.
Anything can become where there is nothing.
Yeah.
So you experience these trials there. And there are these, well, depending on how one would interpret them from the manuscript, there are 3 entities that you encounter when you're there. And each of them attempts to rob you of your key to the oasis of the sun. The first one is the tempter of the desert shade, because you will find yourself in a place sort of like a respite, a brief respite. It is a desert, but it's not without moments of serenity, which is also a test. It's your vulnerability there when he finds you and he tempts you. And the tempter usually says to you, I have this thing that will make all of this so much more bearable, that will make everything make sense. You will be desperate for understanding, desperate to get this over with, to get fucking through it, and just know that you have, okay, the suffering's over now. The tempter will offer you all of that. The second entity that you face after that comes in the form of a different kind of seduction, and it's usually romantic. Because you will find a loneliness unlike you have ever felt in your life when you are truly, truly relinquishing the bonds that you had in the previous life that you had. And someone will come along and tempt you to stay with them in their dark place. So you don't find people there who necessarily are like happy and successful, because they know that your spiritual needs have not yet been fulfilled, that you have not become, and they cannot carry you. They can't bring you with them to their beautiful palace in the ether, their success. You don't usually meet people like that in the existential dark place. You will meet others in the existential dark place. But it's not the time to form romantic bonds, because the love is going to become something that is very, very dark and inescapable. And that is going to be something very difficult to resist, because it will be the challenge of leaving someone behind in what you have already learned to be the most nightmarish and harrowing experience of your life. And these are all things that I myself have lived, but knowing that there is purpose in doing that, not just for yourself, but for them, is triumph over that trial. The last trial is encountering the entity that will tempt you with death. It is the point where you will wish to see it end in any way possible. And it is the dream lock of suicidal despair. When you reach that point, it is something so reasonable, something so comforting and soothing. It is a warm sweater on the darkest, coldest, rainiest night you've ever lived through. And it says, you know, it's okay to feel like you can't anymore. A lot do. And when you don't, and you're gone, it doesn't matter, does it? It will be so reasonable and so clear. It'll make so much sense. It'll make so much sense that to challenge it, to challenge it with the contrary, will feel insane. And that is when you overcome that, you have reached the beginning of your true lore.
Yeah.
Because now you are ready. It has all been relinquished. You have your key to the oasis of the self, where you can examine the qualities that protected you, that allowed you to resist.
Yeah.
And these are the things that you build on. And thus, the perilous path back begins. I say that it's perilous because you have been stripped of your earthly armor, your ego, the things that made you important, the things that gave you strength and meaning and status, anything like that, your identity, who you are, childhood memories, everything has been now questioned. It's all come into question, and now you are ready to build from that and go back greater than you were. The final outcome at the end of your destiny is something greater than you were. And it's also an understanding, a purity, that it was meant to be that way.
It's absolutely harrowing, and and at the same time, I can relate to that, and I kind of archetypically understand this very well, and it brings to my mind one concept which I have been kind of distilling in the Mycelium signal for so many times that it doesn't need to be reintroduced, but I just say the term chapel perilous. Are you familiar with that concept?
With what?
Chapel perilous. The perilous chapel. So very basically, it's an old Arthurian legend. So basically, the knight goes on to a task to kind of save the kingdom, find the chalice of Graal, for example. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing that the knight has to endure this kind of rite of passage, which is very perilous. That is basically a chapel or a graveyard, and there is a seductress, some kind of like a seducing woman or some kind of this kind of siren,
Yes.
And it tries to like drive the knight mad, or tries to kind of corrupt morally the knight. And basically, that sounds very familiar, what you just said about like archetypical advice, that you enter into this kind of like state which is trying to break your soul. It's trying to kind of do something which is even worse than death. And what you said about the final kind of gatekeeper, or the final kind of guardian at the threshold, or however we to term it, it's very harrowing to think that you are in such a predicament that you were offered like the keys to death, to the final, release, and you would be under such a torment that you wouldn't still, open the lock. And I believe this is akin, for example, waterboarding, the instrument of torture.
Yes.
I believe that the world record for withstanding waterboarding torture is around 1 minute 30 seconds or something. But people can withstand, they can kind of, how to say, withhold their breath for like almost 10 minutes or so. But in that kind of torture, it is psychologically and it's kind of like primitively so harsh that you feel like you're drowning, even though you're basically not. But the sensation is so fucking bad. So basically, under that kind of, to give the listeners an idea, under that kind of torture, most people, every people perhaps, would kind of submit and confess, or spill their guts, so to speak. So this I find very interesting idea, that there's like threefold, levels of kind of rites of passage. A challenge. Yeah.
Well, the trials.
Yeah, trials. Yes, that's the word. Yes.
This is, I'm currently. I've been creating music for Materie Abyssu. Materie Abyssu being canonically from the manuscript itself is a term that denotes the substance of corruption itself, the substance of what could be considered vice or evil. It's a material thing that is it's holy, because it is the only thing canonically, according to within Orthodox, that is transcendent of all the realms. It is in both the material plane, it is in the existential dark place, and it is the substance of the abysscape itself. It exists everywhere, which makes it very frightening. And it has been sort of the creative muse for the project itself. Now, one of the albums I included there is the one that we released recently, and I'll be careful with how I explain this because I'm not mentioning this in a deliberate self-promotional sort of way. I do encourage that you listen to it though, because its conventions musically were assembled in a way that's consistent with the themes that are discussed in it. And especially with our vocalist who did a performance, and that's Alice, who's from the United Kingdom, from Swords of Dis. Very, probably one of the only black metal bands to impress me as of late. I give them my highest recommendation. But she joined Materie Abyssu as vocalist. And so her performance, I had told her, it's less like being a traditional vocal performer, a traditional singer, because when I had explained the themes in the context of the manuscript, which I've discussed with her at length, she understood that the performance side of it, the interpretation of it, the execution itself, was more akin to that of mediumship, that it was a channeling in a very real and very ritualistic way. She has a very specific approach to recording that was completely unprecedented to hear about when she told me. But there's a certain conditioning of the space, of her physical form, and the area, and just the constantness of the performance that I had not ever encountered from someone before. That it was done, I don't know if I should say it in terms of recorded in one take kind of a thing, but when you enter these sort of flux states, this entranced, real entrancement, it's very difficult to even recall by your human understanding of things what was done. And thus if we ever were to try to recreate it live, it would be different every single time from what occurs on the CD. But it is the capturing of these real things, these real concepts. Let me just say as well that it was essential for anybody to participate in this, in Materie Abyssu, something that is directly sourced from the manuscript, that we have a discussion that relates just not at all to music, but to the themes themselves, and not the themes in this analytical textbook curriculum-based understanding of it, but in more of a personal talk like you and I are having right now, where we discuss these things in the context of what's actually happened, of these places that we went, our own trips into the existential dark place. It's canonically difficult, even impossible, to go there 2 times.
Yeah.
You don't return to the existential dark place and leave again.
Yeah.
Because that is your destruction if you do go back. And anything that you faced before is now 100 times stronger, 100 times more potent, because now you have been broken by failure, by cynicism, by things that weaken you even more.
Yeah.
It is unlikely that you will survive. In any case, I did want to touch on that as well, because it's significant to understanding of the music of this particular thing that I do. This is probably the highest art that I create at the moment is in Materie Abyssu. But Aevangelist, Benzo, Scrying Mirror, Oblivion Gate, everything is canonical from the manuscript. The manuscript is it's not something that came together that was invented recently. It was a thing that over time, over decades, at least 2 decades, assembled itself in my heart, assembled itself in my spirit, assembled itself as the beginning of my true lore inside the existential dark place. And my monument is the manuscript.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you Even though I think it's quite evident at least it's evident for me, I would believe it's evident for the listeners who are well versed in this kind of topics. But let me ask you firsthand. This is kind of like a stupid, no-brainer question because it's so evident. But do you think yourself that after some time, or maybe maybe from your childhood, from this adult age, do you think you have been like a conduit for something? Because if I look your discography, there's like an ungodly amount of records and the project. And I think this is a good thing. And you have these film projects and these writing projects too. And it's like this kind of prophetic history seems to hint that this flow is coming from somewhere out of your own brain, so to speak.
I think it speaks to the authenticity of everything that I've said and everything that I've written and put into the manuscript. And I might even say that it's been vetted by me, that I would not add anything to it that was not lived, that was not based on any true understanding of catharsis, of the catharsis that was required and extracted from these harrows of the spirit that I did endure. And I believe other people, of course, endure them. The thing about suffering and the thing about dark times and everything, the thing that also relates to keeping spirituality and religion singular to yourself and not sharing it with people, is that once you share it and you try to find commonality, you have let go of its gifts to you in exchange for the validation that comes with forming a connection. It is something more material that you seek if you try to impose your beliefs, if you try to share them, if you try to seek recognition or like some sort of praise for them even, which is something that people do. One of the tenets of Altaros is called clandestine. And that is that at all times, at any level, with one exception, it is not meant to be shared. There is no fellowship. There is no witnessing. There is no going out and converting anybody. Because the only way you can be transformed, that you can be truly illuminated to it, is alone in the existential darkness. This is not something that will be available to many, and I don't mean that in like you can't go and like buy it or whatever, though that's probably not going to be the case either, but what I mean is spiritually it's not available to everybody. Because what you will do, not you, but anybody will do in the existential dark place is strain and reach for their connections to everything that they had in their previous life. It is very, very, very profoundly painful to sever those ties and to get to a point where you are ready to accept that the lessons of this pain are sacred and they are meant for me alone. It requires that you are truly and utterly alone in the existential dark place. And that is when the illumination to all others can begin. There cannot be, there can't be these like baptisms or anything like that. It is a characteristic of it is that it is resistant to conventional ideology. That's what makes it meant to withstand and survive the end times, the end of the world, which is coming. Anyone that has it for themselves will have everything that they need to secure the survival of their lineage after the end times into the new world. And then worlds beyond that. It isn't that you are limited by one end point to your journey to your destiny. Even after you die, your destiny continues. Your destiny is something that is greater than yourself, and it takes years to really understand your position in it. As your true lore begins, you have laid down the foundation for maybe someone else's true lore to begin as well. Someone you know right now is probably in the existential dark place. You can support them in a certain capacity, but you can't hand them something and say, here, this is what's going to help you. This is what's going to get you out. Because at the end of the day, whatever I write, it's just a fucking book. It's just like a bunch of words put together. It doesn't mean anything if someone is giving it to you or selling it to you or trying to like impose it or say like, you got to do it, man. No, it's a thing that occurs to you. It may not even, it doesn't matter what I call these ideas, the names I give them, existential dark place, the abysscape, this or that. It's irrelevant. Your understanding of these things comes before the terminology. The terminology, it illuminates itself to you, and then you acquire it when the time comes. There are degrees of adherence to Orthodox. You start as an aspirant, and it is the most personal side of things. And it is not everybody's destiny to ascend in degree. You can be an aspirant your entire life, if in the context of your destiny it makes the most sense to have spiritual and personal development, to heal, to perhaps be an example that way that will illuminate other people. Then the second degree is meditant. This is the first degree where it is somewhat social, where it may turn out that your destiny involves sort of being available to people spiritually, like spiritual counseling, or sort of just being friends to people, a true friend. This is another divine skill. It's holy to be a true friend to somebody. It's sacred to be a true friend, a friend without judgment. An impartial friend, a friend who's honest, but is not there to tear you down, a friend that will support your successes and not meet your win with jealousy or envy or anything like that. This is a practiced discipline. But everybody who has escaped from the existential dark place now has the capacity to cultivate and nurture this divine gift. After that is the high, well, I can't think of it in terms of high and low, but the third rarest degree, I could say, that is prestige. Prestige, it is the most social. It is also the thing that goes beyond your personal development and the perpetuation of Orthodox as an ideology. In the end times, the simulacra will have consumed everything. And as I said, it is going to be outlawed to believe anything else, to think anything else, to do any of the things that define you as a human being, to create art, which, again, the creation of art is a divine skill. It's one of the tenets. But anyway, that's going to become a risk. Prestige, take the responsibility to see through the continuation of Orthodox in the New World. So that will include a variety of different tasks that will endanger life, that will destroy reputation, that will challenge you in this macrocosmic way. Socially, politically, there's a lot of different levels to this, which are discussed in the second half of the manuscript when it comes to the foundation. Foundation is the ecclesia, the body of, shall we say, churches that make up each particular path to destiny. In the context of what you do, if your destiny, for example, is to be a farmer, maybe as an aspirant, your destiny is therefore to learn and master a thing that meant something to you because it was a skill that was passed down to you from someone that you admire. Your dad, before he died, he was a farmer, and you wanted to see his dream fulfilled. It's something of personal meaning, but also personal strength to you. And it is something you understood in the existential dark place. As meditant, farming could be your enterprise that you wanted to do something for the community in a way that is meaningful to you, that was revealed to you in the existential dark place. But as prestige, you take it upon yourself in a transcendent way to perhaps innovate, to refine something, and to protect it so that it can't be exploited, to preserve agriculture in some way, to form some sort of like non-profit, to do things like that, but also in the context of Altaros. So that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of this grander sort of apocalyptic approach. And the interesting thing is that there are lots of like apocalyptic ideologies, but specifically to us, it's specifically to Altaros, it is apocalyptic, but that you survive the apocalypse, not that you go down with the ship. That's the trick.
Yeah, it's basically like source the Kali Yuga or ride the tiger in the left-hand path.
Yeah.
Basically, when did you begin to kind of conceive the manuscript?
That's a difficult question to answer because it was something that did not occur all at once. It was well, in the existential dark place, it isn't an answer that is clear. It is just that there is an answer. And that is enough to illuminate a path, a direction. When you light a candle in a dark forest, it shows you everything immediately around you, but there's still darkness. But you can go forward and you can navigate the path as it unfolds to you. It's a lot like that. So I did realize that there was a path, that there was something that was meant to happen. That the things that I had ascertained during my time in the existential dark place were significant. They were meaningful. They were essential to me, but they also mirrored a lot of experiences and things and understandings that other people I knew had also gone through. It wasn't necessarily that I thought or took it upon myself to acclaim some, like I don't think of myself as noble or like this, it's not like about titles or anything. Again, in Altaros, it's not about any sort of like validation on the terms of other people that I have achieved anything or that I have even done this or written it or anything. It is that it is meant to be found and that there will come an age again after this where someone else will do the same thing. I am simply living out something that has always happened, and someone will do it again. As the first prestige of this age for the creation of Altaros, I am simply laying down the foundation, and then in the next age, someone will do it again.
So basically, we covered the manuscript concept now, and we already talked about the black metal thing, but one thing which we can kind of do a leeway to close this discussion, I had the term called keel-hauling. It's like basically you kind of distill the gnosis from suffering. So basically, it seems like most of the people I'm acquainted nowadays, whom I feel that are like most aligned with myself, is that they have been through different kind of ordeals, and through these ordeals, I believe people will become more reliable, and they have more character, and they have more depth than the people who have not undergone this kind of trials.
Yes. Without having lived through the trials, the trials of the existential dark place, you have not yet become the version of yourself that is strong enough to carry you across time and space towards the horizon, towards the zenith destiny. You have a chance to reconcile those things, and I think all of the people that we refer to when we think of those who share this nescience, this understanding of things, they've been there in their own way. And they don't need to talk about what it pertains to. They shouldn't. They don't need to make it known the contents of what is inside their existential dark place, what they encountered there, what they faced there. Well, what's valuable is that people take the time to listen to each other and understand how to read between the lines of what people say. Another divine gift is that kind of perception, that discernment, if you will. You know, and I think mystic Catholicism, medieval times, the gift of discernment was the ability to recognize true good and evil. And it was valued in the church. And I mean, this is not my endorsement for Catholicism, don't worry. But I found that to be a very relevant and important concept that doesn't just appear in Catholicism, but it spans a lot of different sort of forms of mysticism. Because people sort of look to spiritual leaders, to ministers, to people like that, reverends. I am a reverend. I am an ordained reverend. And what I've always seen is a failure to grasp this as a concept from people who are supposedly academic ministers, people with masters in divinity, people like that. They go towards this work with a very sort of one-dimensional approach to it, which is just that you are meant to indoctrinate. You are meant to sort of drive people towards this one thing of which you are the emissary. And that isn't what I do as a minister. In fact, I'm working against that to be the example that as somebody with this title, with this role, this vocation, my approach to it is simply that I can offer this kind of support without indoctrinating you. That's very important. It's also one of the tenets of Orthodox, which falls in line with restricting spirituality and religion to something singular within yourself. Because if you are indoctrinating people, you invalidate it. It's immediately invalidated. In Orthodox, it's excommunicatable. You are never to do that. You are never to push it on anybody. That is the failure of your own personal adherence to Orthodox and your upholding of validation, of material rewards. The material rewards are the things they become vice. Vice and nihilism lead to the existential dark place. If someone's already escaped that, and now you've imposed a belief system or a religion or this or that on them, then you are also negating your own position inside your adherence to Orthodox. But what I would seek to do is to help people recognize their gifts and their ability to understand the events and phenomena that have given purpose and meaning to their suffering, to understand or to help them answer their own question of why is this happening, and what, more importantly, what am I supposed to learn from this? And I'm not putting myself in a position to answer these questions or to offer perspective. It's kind of like having a friend who is just really fucking real with you, who isn't going to just give you a bunch of fucking bullshit about meaning in life and empty platitudes, and like someone who is going to say, look, you are in trouble. This is bad. This is as bad as it looks. And this is what it's doing to you. It's almost like being a spiritual doctor. Doctors, by definition, especially if we look at something like Doctors Without Borders, you help anyone. It doesn't matter what they believe, whose side they're on, and it is risky. A lot of them die. They die doing it because the vocation, the calling, is, in this sense, sort of a pre-end times prestige of the last outlaw. It is their last monument to meet their destiny in the fulfillment of this purpose that they found in the existential dark place. If you were to talk to any of the Doctors Without Borders, it is my belief that it wasn't just something they decided to do because they were bored or because they thought it would get them a lot of likes on social media or anything like that. All of that is simulacra. None of it matters. They did it because of something that happened to them in the existential dark place.
Oh, like inner calling.
Exactly.
Yeah, daimonic calling.
Well, however we define it.
Yeah.
And they confronted something there that they overcame.
Yeah.
And they recognized that there were forces at work against people on a level that was destructive, not just physically, but spiritually as well. Doctors Without Borders is something, it's like a divine calling, like being that is a lot like being a real minister, though obviously it's greater than that because you are healing the flesh as well. I'm a nurse. I have worked as a nurse here in Finland and in America, and I've experienced people at their bedside in the existential dark place, at the point of the end. And it isn't really that they are looking for answers anymore. It isn't. It's yes, they are looking for, a relief, comfort from their suffering, which is profound. You can look at people with Alzheimer's or dementia, whose reality itself is under attack by themselves. But the meaning that is left for them to ascertain from things around them is a lot of what's mirrored in things like these divine gifts, being a real friend, understanding, telling them things to remind them of their humanity, of who they are, because stuff like Alzheimer's and dementia is dehumanizing. And it's not about indoctrinating them. It's, again, I can't overstate that. It would never be about let me tell you what Altaros said. It would never be about that. It's purely just the capacity to look at somebody, to sit by them at their bedside. They are in terror because every single day they have to be told that their family members are dead and they have to take it like it's a car accident.
Yeah.
But to be there with them and remind them that they are loved, that they are not alone. And
that reminds me of the shamans of old, kind of like eaters of sin eaters, in the sense that you deliberately you are standing in the line of fire. You are like a bodyguard for a president who is going to step in the way of the bullet. And I think this is something which is very what's the word? There is honor in that, and there is like a duty in that. And it's something like you don't get any medals for, and I think most people most often are after some kind of recognition and this kind of thing. Yeah, I would believe being a nurse is often like a thankless job.
It's thankless, and if you are a person of any integrity, you don't really want to go and just talk about, this is the good thing I did today. If you are doing it for that, it'll destroy you.
Yeah.
Because it isn't always obvious that what you did was the right thing or that it was a good thing. But it may be obvious that it was something that needed to be done. And there are lessons from this, from being in the medical field, that parallel quite closely with spiritual work, with being a reverend. Being a reverend in its truest form is kind of like being a spiritual doctor.
Yeah.
A spiritual doctor without borders. I will close this by basically saying that it wouldn't matter if I was approached by a Christian or a Satanist or a Muslim or anybody, but if they were in crisis, if they were in the existential dark place, by Altaros, I would simply offer them perspective and support. It isn't indoctrination. It isn't because this thing I believe or follow or whatever is the real deal and true and it's going to save you. It's not that. In fact, I wouldn't want to say that. I would remind them that you are in what will be, make no mistake, the fight of your life. Not just for your physical form, but for your spiritual form. And what you need to find are the tools, the qualities, the things that are going to help protect you in the wilderness of the heart that you're in right now, where everything that you hold dear is going to be stripped and destroyed and taken from you. But you have to be able to come back. And that's the thing that will get you through if you are meant to go build a mosque or a synagogue, or if you are meant to do something entirely different, by Altharos, I would advise them to go towards them. It is not Altharosian to submit to something and be fully this thing and define yourself as this thing. It is Altharosian to fulfill who you are and survive the harrows of the spirit in the existential dark place, to face your true lore and allow it to carry you across the liminal realms to glory and beauty forever, who you're meant to be and who you're meant to become.
This is, I don't know what else to add to that, except that what I would like to see more in the world is depth, and kind of for people to dive deeper into themselves and to their own initiation. And I believe it's a commendable effort to do something without instant gratification, and in the sense that, like you said, that one must transcend your own biases and your own how would you say, your own preferences and
preferences, your limitations, the need for the gratification of it happening right away, and all of this is a limitation. It's going to change in the existential dark place because you will cultivate an understanding, a responsibility to have patience. Real patience without reward is divine.
Yeah.
It's sacred. To be able to do that, it requires focus. It's meditative. It's exactly parallel and along the same lines as many esoteric and mystical disciplines. And specifically to Altharos, it demands that you resist exploitation. Hide your good works. Hide your deeds.
Oh. This exactly brings to my mind, just a quick note, there was this sect in the East, I would believe it was called Malamatia, being blameworthy. I think it was somehow associated with the Sufis back in the day, and they had this tradition that they should be blameworthy for in order to kind of strip away their ego. They thought that they would be closer to God without any kind of blanket or like a mattress to hide unwanted things in yourself. And I believe this is somehow related to the original tantric left-hand path, in the sense that you are like a kind of opposing and destroying the dualisms of the mind in order to see deeper. Yes. And of course that will be painful. And yes, I think this is a good point to conclude this discussion, which we can maybe continue later on some day.
Yes, we should. And I think to append to what you said, I will close with two quotes. The first quote is one that's stayed with me for many years, and it's from Danny Aiello's character in Jacob's Ladder. He played Jacob's chiropractor Louis, who was a source of spiritual guidance to him. When Jacob was telling him that he felt like he was hallucinating and seeing monsters and demons everywhere, it's especially profound if you know the context of the entire movie. But that Louis says to him, if you're afraid of dying and you're holding on, you will see devils tearing your life away from you. But if you've made your peace, the devils are really angels freeing you from the world. And that stuck with me my entire life. I first watched that movie at the very inappropriate age of 12, but it lasted my entire life, and it's one of my all-time favorite films. And the second quote I'll give you is just of my own, and it's from the manuscript, and it is that the dark of the night is the color of death, and darkness is the matter of the spirit. I won't provide any elaboration on it. I just want it to sort of echo in the mind for a little while, and it will do what it's meant to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matron Thorn, and have a good night, listeners.
You as well. You be careful out there in the shadows constantly.
Appreciate it.